Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Dwarves Gone Wild event, in which the Kryshound is added to the game. So let's get into that. So as far as the Kryshound, it comes with a brown-yellow trait stone, which you can get for 300 each. As far as things that you would throw it in, there is quite a lot of options. Earlier on in the game, you'd mostly go for Cockatrice and Dragonian Monk. Though there are also things like Bullet, Ethereal Sentry, Mervrax, and Kryshound itself that you might want to go and trait. And later on in the game, you'd want to go and trait into things like Gobtrumper, Gorgotha, Queen Zachi, which is particularly useful this week, as well as Wrath with its skull spam explosions. As far as this troop, it is actually really good. We have a half an enemy's HP and armor. This makes it really good for upscaling. Probably not going to be used too much for things like PvP. Probably won't even be used in Guild Wars because I don't believe its damage counts as damage with how Guild Wars ends up calculating it out. However, this would be a pretty decent option to incorporate into various stealth teams, as it would be able to upscale as well as possibly be able to be incorporated into things like Tower of Doom. So any kind of upscaling content that's going to be going pretty high, this thing could be useful for, since obviously having an enemy's HP and armor would be more effective if they have more stats. It also gets to do a relatively big amount of gem spawn. It's a little bit inconsistent with the number, but 9 to 13 is still a large amount. And it'll be able to create that into blue, which you'll be able to feed and potentially loop with it with other various troops that can feed into blue, that can then feed it back into brown or yellow. It counts as a construct beast, so it can be given a half mana start if used with Forest Guardian, which would also end up synergizing in that way. As well as why you might want to trade it is 50% score reduction, so it can be ran in first slots, but more often than not, you're probably using it as second slot since it is a mana generator. And it also has Stone Link, which works into itself, or you could also use it with other browns in order to feed that +1 brown into them. So overall, pretty solid troop. Not really one that's going to be used too late into the game just because there's way better options out there. However, if you don't really have a good upscaling option to synergize with something like Mang Apothecary, like for example, Mang Apothecary this and one other option, could end up being a pretty good selection to put in there for when you lack other better legends and mythics that might be able to be put into the slot. And it is only an ultra rare, and of course it's only 300 glory this week, so definitely good to stock up. I do keep in mind it is, given what its ability is, it does not upscale that much when being upgraded, so you don't necessarily need to upgrade this thing all the way to Mythic, simply because doing so will only really increase its stats, which you're not really going to be using. You're mostly using it more so for its ability if you're using it for anything. But anyways, that's that. As far as things that we have throughout the week, we have quite a few things as far as stuff that's going on. Main thing is Talk Like a Pirate Week. We do have one extra map whenever we find and kill these things. That's not the main thing, but the main thing is that we do have the pirate event, which is bringing in a few other things along the week. Other than that, we do have ourselves the over here 10% to all of our Drakzoom, as well as 10% to all dwarves. This does have a decent amount of 20% overlap within the kingdom, as the kingdom is composed of about half dwarves. Particularly Bloodhammer and stuff like that would be pretty decent to use this week, if you still want to use it. Kryshound does have an extra 400 gold in PvP and Explore, so if you want to farm a little bit extra gold off of that, that will be available, and will be pretty easy to feed things like a Rowan if you want to use an Explore to feed it blue, or just slotting into PvP and use it as a bit of a blue mana generator. In both cases, it won't really slow down your team that much, and you'll be able to get yourself a little bit of extra gold. As far as the event keys this week, they are somewhat worth using. There's nothing new in the drop table, however, of course, is a Drakzoom event, and with a Drakzoom event, that means we have a lot of Doomskull options. Drakzoom is the kingdom that originally brought in the Doomskull mechanics, and there are definitely a decent selection to be able to obtain. As far as what's obtainable through event keys, every single thing here, except for Doom of Stone, is what you'd be able to get. The most noteworthy drops that you'd be able to get are Ice Goblin, Bloodhammer, and the Glaceon, with Glaceon and Bloodhammer being the two ones that you're mainly going for. Ice Goblin's mainly used as an explosion option. Having more copies of him isn't really going to be too big a deal, since again he has an ability similar to the Kryshound, where upgrading it won't necessarily really increase the ability, it's just really increasing his stats, but still has a nice double explosion, little board clear into automatic extra turn into a freeze, a little bit of a good free spam option, and just keeps doing automatic board clears. But the two big ones are Glaceon and King Bloodhammer, both of which are legendaries. They both have a skull spam related option. In the case of Glaceon, it's a double convert, That'll be able to also get a freeze on top of that. Also has 65% score reduction, which makes it a really good first slot option. And other than that, there's King Bloodhammer, which has the most consistent Doom Storm in the entire game, being able to summon a Doom Storm whenever the enemy dies, which is currently the most spammable version of a Doom Storm. And other than that, it also gets to hit some enemies and convert all blues into Doom Skull. And of course, it's 20% this week, as I mentioned earlier. The only other drop that you may try going for is Obsidious, though there are 2 mythics within this kingdom, and the other one is completely abysmal. So you're probably not going to spam event keys to try to get that, because there's a good chance you might accidentally get a completely useless mythic. So if you need 1 mythic from this kingdom in order to end up getting the eventual upgrade, then you might want to consider if you don't plan on crafting Obsidious anytime soon. However, I would just go for until you get Kryshound and Bloodhammer, and probably just stop there as far as event keys are concerned. As far as the guild-related week, we have ourselves raids, and with raids, we have ourselves Drakzoom restriction. And for that, there are a couple different ways that we can go about this. This is one team that I'm showing for now. They'll show a few more in a little bit. But yeah, basically all you have to do is just run a Mang team. There is a billion different skull spam options from this kingdom, and just doing Mang into skull spam while using Titan just so you stay safe with constant barriers is pretty much the way to go as far as this week is concerned. Biggest real concern is the raid troop, the one that will end up hitting the boss. You do have to be careful because it converts all greens to Doom Skulls. This is a little bit of a liability given that you could not have alignment on given instances. However, right here we do, and then we'll get a really high impact. So you may have noticed that we didn't end up casting a little bit earlier into the battle. That was because we didn't have alignment. One big issue that will arise is due to the requiring that green to Doom Skull alignment, you might have to hold off on casting it at certain times within a battle, since you might end up giving the enemy a 4 times or 5 times skull, possibly even multiple of them. So you don't want to ever cast her when it doesn't have alignment, or if you are going to cast her, at least make sure that the enemy has no kind of extra turn that it can end up taking from the greens being converted to Doom Skulls. So be a little bit careful of that. Besides from that, it ends up working out pretty well, gets pretty quick kills, and all you really have to do is just throw down Mang once onto the Zugoff, and then spam everything else, making sure that they have alignment when you do so. And that is pretty much the raid week in a nutshell. We did get a new weapon, of course, through this. It's not really that good, though. You can pretty much just ignore it. It's just a Drakzoom ally bonus. There's currently no good Drakzoom synergies. The most you're ever going to use within a team is Kryshound plus Bloodhammer, but that's not really going to get you that far. Blue-brown would feed into them. However, you're not really going to bother putting this weapon into most of those related teams, as you're going to be denying out your yellow anyways if you're using Kryshound, and you won't really have any good way to be able to get this mana accumulated. So not really anything you'd bother using for the most part within a Drakzoom combination. Maybe if we end up getting one other good option into the future, you can kind of make it work. However, there's just not a good 4th option to be able to make a Drakzoom weapon work. Maybe once we get a hero class for the kingdom, and once we get a few more troops, it might work, but as it currently stands, this weapon is one of those double convert ones that is currently useless now. However, could theoretically be useful into the future, and that is where it currently stands. But as this exact moment in time, it is not useful, but you probably still want to get it just for collection purposes, as it will be cheaper to get it now as it will be into the future. Other than that, things that we have going on this week, quite a few. So, Tuesday, faction event. We do have Sea of Sorrows. There's actually a pretty good team that can be used now using some of the stuff that is available right now that we'll be showing in a moment. But actually, I might as well go show it right now. So, as far as what we can use for this, there's a pretty fun Delve team. I showed something really similar to this in the past. Stone Slicer with triple Gargoyle, or Stone Slicer with double Gargoyle and Gimlet. However, there is a better version of it now, and that is a Stone Slicer, Kryshound, and double Gargoyle. But basically what this Stone Slicer is, which is also available in Soulforge this week, by the way. So if you don't have it, this is an old event weapon. However, it is available right now. So you can go get it literally right now and through the rest of this week. But Stone Slicer ends up boosting based on constructs. That's not the biggest thing that makes it viable, though. What makes it really viable is the fact that it creates purple. And it uses purple. So it creates a color that it actually uses. And the other color happens to be a very useful brown, which can be used into a lot of useful constructs, mainly being the gargoyles. So we can end up doing this, going and creating a bunch of blues, which feed back into Slicer. We then throw down Slicer, which gives us gargoyles. And then we just kind of keep repeating that. And of course, Slicer also gives itself mana. And then you just spam your gargoyles, and then you win. But yeah, going to be pretty solid. It, of course, only runs for the free battles. You wouldn't use this the entire time. Runs up until about 100. You could maybe use it a little bit further than 100, given that the Kryshound will allow you to go a little bit further because of its halving capabilities. However, for the free battles, which is generally how far you would normally go on these events, it'll be perfectly fine just to go up to 80, 90, or 100, or wherever you need to go for it. And it'll just work up to that end, and I wouldn't really use it too much beyond that if you're going like all the way, but most people are probably just going to be doing it for, of course, all rewards. It's only take around tier 8 or so, or not tier 8, but up to floor 8, level 80. But yeah, that's all you really need to do for that. As far as the other events, though, this Wednesday we have, for Talk Like a Pirate Week, we do have ourselves a new cosmetic pet. This thing is just a Blackhawk pet, nothing special about it. It is cosmetic. This Thursday, we technically have nothing Gems of War related. However, on this Thursday, the HD remake of Puzzle Quest 1 is being released. It is a Switch exclusive, however, we will be streaming on this channel. Made by the same developers as Gems of War, though a different publisher. But still, they're redoing it. They're adding some new hero classes, some DLC to it, or free DLC to it, and a bunch of other stuff. So I'll be streaming that this Thursday as well as into the next week or so, and messing around with that. But yeah, it's a really, really good game if you haven't tried it out. It's available, the non-HD remake is available right now on a bunch of different platforms like Steam and stuff. If you want to go check it out, definitely a really, really good game. It's the best game they've ever made that isn't Gems of War. So definitely worth considering. Otherwise, we'll be streaming it this Thursday and into the future. But that's what's happening on Thursday. And on Friday, we have ourselves a new hero class. This hero class will be a Suncrest Strix. The most noteworthy thing it'll have is a perpetual yellow storm into cleanse into explode. So it'll cleanse and explode every single extra turn you do, as well as have perpetual yellow storm. This will obviously be a pretty decent hero class. It was originally going to be pretty bad, but then they finally gave it a good third trait, which is the perpetual yellow storm. So yeah, obviously it could be decent in Yellow Guild War Day or any kind of team that is really Yellow Storm dependent, such as Taloka, as well as even just Suncrest related teams in general. Or not Suncrest, yeah, Suncrest. Suncrest related teams in general, as a good majority of them do use yellow or have a storm dependency. So overall, it should be a nice hero class. Not going to be like one of the top few. However, it's definitely going to be above average as far as hero classes are concerned, and will mostly be utilized for the typing that it is, the fact that it is a Suncrest Strix, and the fact that it has Yellow Storm. Those are the two main aspects that I'll end up using. And that's everything that we have going on throughout the week. As far as Soul Forge, we have ourselves quite a few decent options to get. The most noteworthy thing as far as Mythics is Tina 9000. Tina 9000 is currently the best 50% spell reduction troop in the entire game, having 50% spell reduction, the capability of gaining extra armor off of two different methods, its ability and its trait, and also having 50% extra skull damage based on its armor, which isn't really used as much. It's mostly used for its ability, into the fact that it has 50% spell reduction, and its ability being a really high true damage option that can occasionally pick off a free kill just from casting it, so it ends up working out quite decently for just chipping out the enemy team. Also works pretty good against really magic heavy teams like Yagway, Queen of Tanya, and other similar things in order to hard counter them. And yeah, mainly used as a good true damage option and best 50% spell reduction in the game. Definitely worth considering. I would generally get things like Ketris first, which is the exact same coloration of it, just because it has a bit more viability as far as what it can be used for. But Tina 9000, definitely a good Guild War pickup, and can be used occasionally in PvP and Delves as well, depending on the situation that it calls for. And into the future, we'll have more and more combinations within various true damage related teams. But definitely Ketris, I would say, to craft first. As far as what's craftable this week that is worth it, that is by far the best and pretty much only thing as far as Mythics are concerned and Legends. But as far as weapons, there is a billion things that are worth crafting. Basically every single weapon that is available this week is worth getting. So the first one, and probably most noteworthy one, is Stone Slicer. This was the one I was just mentioning earlier with the Delve theme that you could potentially do. This ends up boost ratio based on construct. Pretty much already explained all this, but yeah, it feeds purple into itself. A really, really highly advised weapon to get, as it works great with for Delve days, and it works great with the new troop that just came into the game, the Kryshound combined with the Gargoyles. And yeah, just kill really quickly with Gargoyles. Great weapon to have. Definitely advise getting it. Doomed Blade, obviously any of the Doom Skull creating weapons are going to be insanely good. This one is no different. It's basically like a Shegra with AoE into a bunch of extra damage. Highly advised getting. It's a little bit pricier, of course, since it is a Doom weapon. However, it is one of the decent colorations of the Doom weapon, since it does use blue. Quite a few ways to be able to feed this with blue and then just go and get your Doom Skull spam. Also, the fact that it counters red, meaning that you can counter things like Yagway, Queen of Tanya teams and other similar kind of compositions, makes it pretty good and definitely worth getting. Withering Staff is just something that is available for... wait, is that the faction weapon? Actually, don't forget, what is the Sea of Sorrows? I don't believe that is. Oh, it is. Never mind. Yeah, Withering Staff is just an entangle option. Is available for just today. Is decently worth getting. Main thing that this is used for is, though you can just get it off to the faction event, but this is mainly used for its entangle into some skull creation. It's a decent weapon to have with things like Wrath and any kind of composition where you're going to be running a lot of skull spam, but you don't necessarily want to take a lot of damage back, but you also don't want to waste a slot for something just to entangle. So instead of putting like a Salvini Mora on your team, you can put this on your team as a hero slot and simply have a skull option while still be able to do the entangle. So that's one of the main things it's used for, is the fact that it has skull spawn into entangle, so you get both those two combinations into the exact same spot. And things like Glaceon can feed into it and other stuff like that. But okay weapon to get. Definitely worth considering for skull spam teams. And the other thing to get that's available all this week is Fire and Ice, another good one. Literally none of them are bad. Fire and Ice is basically a smaller version of Dawnbringer. Nowhere near as good as Dawnbringer, however, it is exponentially cheaper than a Dawnbringer. So it is worth considering if you're nowhere's even remotely close to getting a Dawnbringer to go get Fire and Ice, as it's just a good utility weapon to have. It's essentially just an AoE weapon that covers those colorations. There are some instances where you might need a red-blue weapon where you wouldn't be able to cover it by other means. So, for example, if you weren't to have Dawnbringer, the only red AoE weapon that does the full amount of damage, if I'm not mistaken, is Summer's Fury. So you kind of have to go either into Dawnbringer or eventually into Fire and Ice. So you could just get Fire and Ice now, have a slightly better option than that covers two colors, and eventually go into Dawnbringer. Definitely not the greatest of weapons, but it's basically the closest thing you have to a Dawnbringer alternative, other than that one blue weapon off of Frostmage hero class. It also ends up working out slightly decent for that. However, both of those have the issue of only covering one color, of course, and generally you do want to be able to cover two colors or multiple colors whenever you can. But yeah, basically every single weapon here you should go and craft. Every single one that's only available this week, or specifically with Withering Staff on this day. Other than that, let's go over some teams now. So several teams I want to just go and show real quick, all of which will of course be in the comment section below. Let's start all the way from the bottom. Raid Skulls, this one I already showed. This is the main team I'll probably be using. Mang, Glaceon, Moria, and King Bloodhammer. Basically just throw the Mang onto the raid boss, and then throw everything else when they have alignment. Make sure to only cast the raid troop when you specifically have alignment, otherwise it will backfire. Next, with no legends, you can go Mang, Ice Goblin, Kryshound, and Moria, the raid troop. This obviously uses no legends, and everything is epic or below as far as rarity is concerned, and should be pretty easy to end up composing the team. And still gives you a decent amount of options with the extra turn explode off a goblin, the little bit of freezes, which is actually relevant during raids, since there'll be 3 things I'll be able to hit, and Kryshound to feed both of them blues, and also to be able to half their stats, which will upscale decently throughout raids. And of course the raid troops keep picking off everything. And then the other team that we have here is for Delves. This was one of the other ones I ended up mentioning. Of course, we can use the Slicer weapon into Kryshound. His entire team is constructs other than our hero, because there's currently no construct hero class. But we'll be able to do this, feed right into our double gargoyle as well as our Kryshound, and then keep feeding back from Slicer into Kryshound, and just keep killing them with gargoyle damage, and ends up working out pretty decently. And does upscale to at least 100, could probably go a little bit further than that. But as far as just doing the free battles to get all the rewards done on a Tuesday event, it'll be perfectly fine for running that on any applicable delve that runs the coloration. You'll be able to run this on plenty of other delves into the future too. Any delve that uses brown, you'll be able to use this. You'll also be able to use it on delves that don't use brown, but do use yellow and red in combination. But those will be the kind of delves that you'll be able to use it for. Next up, we have ourselves the Tesla Kryshound. Not too many things that we can end up doing with this. I thought Kryshound would have a little bit more combinations, but after testing it quite a bit, it seems to really only have a few. Things like Gob Truffle, Iron Gut, and Tesla. And of all of them that could really use it better compared to other options, I would probably say is Tesla. And basically what we just do here is just have the Apothecary Kryshound keep feeding back to each other, and then Tesla to clear everything out. This does end up tearing some of the armor, however, you're tearing more life than armor, and overall with how the boost ratio is, you're net gaining still more damage, and if nothing else, you can still do it as a pick-off. Obviously with Tesla, you don't really get to choose what you get to target to do more damage to. However, with the Kryshound, you can just target whatever the biggest threat is, target it with that, and then throw your Teslas, and then that whatever you targeted with your Kryshound will die prior to the other 3 enemies on the opposing team. You can kind of use that to indirectly choose what target you end up killing out first with your Tesla, and just run it without into the loop. And you could always just use hero in first slot and just get rid of one of the Teslas. However, that would technically slow down the team, but would give you class XP for whatever class you want to leveled. Next up, we have ourselves Stormcaller class. Of course, we are getting Stormcaller this Friday. You're going to be restricted to using Suncrest Strixes. And as far as the team that you would use for this, you would most likely use Nimbus Bow if you happen to have it, with Queen Zachi, Taloka, and Harpy Mage. If you do not have Nimbus Bow, next alternative would probably just be to go Mountain Crusher for it, and just keep doing that to feed your Queen Zachi. You can also go down the Mang route. You can also go down the Trickster Shot route if you happen to have it, and any of those would end up working out pretty decently. And the whole premise here is that you just spam your first slot weapon in order to mana generate for the team. Queen Zachi spams her AoEs with explosions because you'll almost guarantee have a storm since you're getting Yellow Storm every single turn off the new hero class. And even if you didn't, Harpy Mage creates a Brown Storm. And Harpy Mage, 75% mana start, use it for mana generation. And Taloka, every extra turn you just get to do 10 free damage. And you can use it somewhat similar to that of a Rowain or Sunbird. And that is, if there's a storm, it does a pretty substantial amount of scatter damage. Doesn't upscale as much as those two troops, however, still does a pretty substantial amount of damage, relatively similar to them in the current state of the game. So still ends up working out pretty well. And next up, we have the other one that you can end up using for that event. This one ends up using Dawnbringer and Triple Taloka. This is most likely what I'll personally be using, since I'm not going to be going all the way for the new hero classes. Actually, I don't know. We might be going all the way, actually. I might be buying it up. I still haven't decided yet if we're going to spend like 2,000 gems on the new hero class. I might, just to speed it up a little bit. But if I don't, this is more likely what I'll run. If I do, if you're going like all the way towards the end there, this is something more likely that what you would run, something with more variety that actually builds up a full team composition rather than just rushing down the enemy. And lastly, if you don't have any of that, one other option that you could do is doing Mountain Crusher with Queen Zachi. And if you don't have a bunch of copies of her, you can just throw some shards at the portal for the Stone Song Aerie, and end up getting a bunch of drops of her and end up using her for the event, and just keep killing her with the Storm 5 explosions into a full AoE. It works kind of similarly to that of Infernus in a way, so ends up doing quite a decent amount of damage while doing explosion. It does have to worry about Submerge, but in the case of class events, if I'm not mistaken, there actually isn't any Submerge, or at least a very, very minimal chance that it appears. But if I'm not mistaken, there actually is 0 Submerge within doing class events, so it will end up working out pretty well, even though you're kind of restricted to just AoEs for that. But anyways, guys, now we'll wrap it up for this event video. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. As I mentioned, we will be covering the HD remake of Puzzle Quest, made by the same developers of Gems of War this Thursday and into the week or two after. I'll be streaming that a decent amount. Other than that, this Friday we will be having the new class, which we'll be covering quite extensively, and I probably will be throwing gems at it, so if we do, we'll probably be able to cover it a little bit more in depth, a little bit quicker. We really just need to rush it to level 70. I don't believe it has a good level 100, if I'm not mistaken, like most hero classes. But level 70 is going to be pretty decent because he does end up accumulating a free explode every extra turn, which is obviously pretty decent. And yeah, overall going to be a pretty fun hero class to mess around with. Anyways, if you have any other questions, leave it below and I'll get around to them. Thank you all so much for watching and have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone.